A woman stepped into the opulent foyer of the Monarch, one of the most celebrated restaurants in the city. Her presence was quiet, graceful. She wore a simple black dress, heels that had clearly walked through more than fashion shows, and a soft shawl that clung to her like a whisper. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her makeup minimal but elegant. She was the picture of quiet confidence. Yet as she entered, her serenity was met not with warmth, but suspicion. The hostess, a young man named Craig, glanced up from his podium. His polished demeanor flickered for just a moment when his eyes fell on her. He offered a tight smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good evening," the woman said softly. "A table for one, please." Craig's gaze quickly swept over her. Heels, dress, the slight curve of her voice. Then came the change. His posture stiffened, and the smile faded into something more mechanical. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked curtly. "No," she replied. "I was hoping to be seated anyway." He let out a breath that bordered on a scoff. "We're typically reservation only, and, well, it's a very particular atmosphere here. Our guests expect a certain ambiance." She nodded gently. "I understand. Still, I'd like a table if one is available." Craig hesitated. Then, as if to make a statement, he grabbed a menu and gestured stiffly. "This way." He led her not to the heart of the restaurant, where the golden chandeliers cast a soft glow over the polished tables and clinking wine glasses, but to the far corner near the hallway, leading to the restrooms, a table barely lit, away from view. "You'll be fine here," he said flatly, dropping the menu onto the table. "Your server will be with you shortly." She sat quietly, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room, not with judgment, but with stillness. Moments later, another waiter approached. His name was Brandon. Tall, handsome, and confident in a way that sometimes crossed into arrogance. He glanced at the woman, and then did a double-take. His smile curled, but not kindly. "Well," he said, voice loud enough to carry, "this is unexpected. Are you sure you're in the right place?" She looked up, calm and kind. "I believe so." Brandon chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, I'm not here to judge, but this is the Monarch. We have standards. Our guests come here for a certain level of sophistication." "Then I'm in the perfect place," she said, still smiling. Brandon scoffed. "All right, but just so you know, we don't do split checks here, and we expect a minimum order." She nodded. "Understood." He leaned in, smirking. "And this isn't a place for experiments, sweetheart. We don't do performances." Several nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably. A couple exchanged glances. A man at a nearby table lowered his wine glass, his eyes narrowing at the cruel implication. Still, the woman remained composed. "Thank you. I'd like to start with the house red and the duck confit." Brandon blinked. "All right, then." He left with a scoff. But he didn't walk far before the manager, Isabel, sharp-eyed and poised, intercepted him. "Brandon," she said under her breath, "what are you doing?" "Just dealing with an unusual guest," he replied with a smirk. Isabel's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who that is?" Brandon frowned. Some influencer trying to make a statement. She shook her head slowly, then whispered something into his ear. His face went pale. Back at the table, the woman took a slow sip of her wine when Isabel approached, composed but clearly shaken. "Ms. Rivera," Isabel said gently, "please forgive us. I'm deeply sorry for the way you've been treated. Your presence here means the world to us." Brandon stood awkwardly beside her, his face a mix of guilt and disbelief. "Thank you, Isabel," Ms. Rivera replied, "but I think it's important we address something tonight." She stood slowly and turned to face the room. Conversations quieted. The subtle clink of silverware gave way to attentive silence. "Kindness isn't a luxury," she began, her voice steady and sure. "It's the standard. Or it should be. No one who walks through these doors should be made to feel lesser, or out of place, or strange. Not for their voice, not for their clothes, not for their identity." She turned to Brandon. "You didn't know who I was. That's fine. But you didn't treat me with basic human decency. That's not fine." Brandon swallowed, speechless. Ms. Rivera turned back to the diners. "I'm the new majority owner of the Monarch, and I didn't come tonight to be noticed. I came to see how our values are lived. I saw what needs to change, and I promise you, it will." The room burst into soft applause. Some patrons stood, others simply nodded with respect. As Miss Rivera returned to her table, Isabel dismissed Brandon for the evening and instructed the staff to meet after closing. That night, Ms. Rivera addressed them with compassion, not wrath. "We all carry biases," she said. "The question is, do we let them define us, or do we do the work to move beyond them?" Brandon, tears in his eyes, approached her after the meeting. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I let my ignorance become cruelty." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let your growth become your redemption." The Monarch became known not just for its food, but for its soul. And Ms. Rivera, once humiliated, became a symbol of what grace under fire truly looks like. Because in the end, strength isn't in what you wear. It's in how you treat people who have every reason not to forgive you, and choose to anyway. The following Saturday, Ms. Rivera returned once more, but this time with guests. 3 individuals stood behind her. A young queer chef from a local community kitchen, a black trans woman who worked as a teacher and advocate, and a non-binary barista who had recently lost their job due to workplace discrimination. They weren't celebrities. They weren't influencers. They were people who understood what it meant to be unseen. "I'd like to introduce a few friends," she told Isabel, who had since become a loyal ally and advocate herself. Tonight, they dine like royalty. They were guided to the best table in the center of the room, under the magnificent chandelier. As they sat, patrons noticed. Some smiled, a few whispered, but no one sneered, not this time. Brandon, wearing a crisp new uniform and a humbler spirit, approached with practiced grace. "Would you like me to guide you through the chef's specials, or would you prefer the tasting menu?" he asked, his tone even and warm. Ms. Rivera nodded from across the room, silently proud. Later that night, a small incident arose. A businessman seated nearby raised a complaint to the maître d', questioning whether the restaurant was changing direction with its clientele. "I just think some spaces should maintain a standard," he muttered. "This used to be a place for elegance." Isabel walked calmly to Ms. Rivera and explained the situation. "Let me handle it," she said. She approached the table, her heels quiet against the marble floor. "Sir," she began gently, "I understand you've raised a concern, and I'd like to respond personally." The man looked up, surprised. "I meant no offense. It's just, this place had a certain reputation." Ms. Rivera smiled softly. "It still does, but now, our reputation will include compassion, authenticity, courage. Elegance, after all, is not found in exclusion. It's found in how we make others feel. That's the standard now." The man looked sheepish, nodding slowly. "I see." "Enjoy your evening," she said, turning back toward the center of the restaurant, where the pianist had begun to play something gentle and timeless. The Monarch was no longer just a restaurant. It had become a quiet revolution in velvet chairs and soft lighting. Word spread. Local news ran a feature. Influencers arrived, not for selfies, but to learn. Letters poured in from people across the country. Many said the same thing. "Thank you for making a place where people like me can breathe." 1 year later, the Monarch was awarded a prestigious national honor, not for its cuisine, but for its cultural contribution to hospitality. At the award ceremony, Ms. Rivera took the stage. She paused, looked over the audience, and began. "I never wanted to own a restaurant. I wanted to own a space where the world might feel a little softer, a little more forgiving, a space where no one has to prove their worth to sit at a table." She looked down at the plaque in her hands and smiled. "This isn't an award for me. It's a reminder, for all of us, that even in the smallest acts, pouring water, taking an order, holding eye contact, we are shaping the world. Let's make it one worth living in." As the years passed, stories from the Monarch became the stuff of legend. It wasn't just a place for the wealthy anymore. It was a place for anyone who believed in something bigger than fine dining. Patrons would tell newcomers, "Don't come here just for the food. Come for the feeling." And through it all, Miss Rivera remained a quiet figure, never seeking attention, only embodying the values she instilled. She would sometimes sit in that same dimly lit corner where she was once humiliated, now transformed into her favorite table. And if a new guest ever looked unsure or out of place, she would smile at them across the room, as if to say, "You belong here. You always have." Because true ownership is not about controlling space. It's about protecting the people in it. And the Monarch had become the safest place in the city to simply be human.